afterwards. So you can join me for that. So you can see it in it'll be Tobias, make the announcement.
All right. Hello, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. We are your hosts this evening. I'm Tobias Berblinger. This is Will Lacoma. Together, we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you. Our series highlights an eclectic group of speakers, experiences, and workshops across a broad range of subjects in the areas of culture, design, science, technology, fabrication techniques, and lost common knowledge.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you are all now members provided you adhere to our philosophy. Ex curiositas scientia. We pledge to learn without prejudice in pursuit of our mutual goal, perpetual noviceship. We admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens us and excites us and makes us hungry for more.
And now we are very happy to introduce Chris Higgins. Chris is a writer, blogger, and iPhone developer extraordinaire. He writes for Mental Floss magazine and their website, and he recently had a story on This American Life. And he had a cover story last year in the Portland Mercury.
Thanks, you guys. For tax reasons, I have to wear this jacket and be photographed in it. So if it's a camera, it would really help me out if you would photograph this. It's really hot, I'm going to take it off. I will wait. It's actually true. It's considered a costume for legal reasons. It's Dutch's. It's really great if you guys want to get a really good men's suit. And most of you guys aren't men, so it's cool. Got one? Okay, good. I promised you guys a lot of things on the internet. And I'm not going to deliver most of them until the Q&A. The prepared remarks are primarily about stealing things, Florida, failure, sadness, and the human condition. I'd like to thank, first of all, Duchess for providing the costume tonight. If anyone would like a Diet Coke, I brought some non-ironic Diet Cokes that are over there in the thing. And thanks to Tobias and Carl and Ro and everybody else here. This is a picture of me in the Portland Mystery Hedge. Circa, let's say 2000, 2001. Photograph was taken by Ransom Riggs, who is not here today because he is busy being famous, and he's quite a good photographer. And one of the lessons that I'm going to try to bring up later is try to be friends with people who are good at things that you are not. And yeah, that's it for that slide. This is about, yeah man, how's it going? This is about primarily what it's like to be in my head. These are some topics that I plan to cover. Welcome to my life. This first part would be my life at Florida State University, which was 96 through 99. Florida State was in Florida, which was its main problem. It's in North Florida, in Tallahassee. And primarily, my experience at Florida State was walking to and from places and becoming increasingly hot. I really value being in a place that's not super hot, so I put on a lot of layers as a result. Not much was happening. This was actually a thing. This was the kind of shit that you walk around and see. I mean, does that come through? Yeah, it says enthusiasm on the little sign. In all caps, and this was like 50 feet high, and the thing itself must have been about, yeah. So we had to make our own fun. This is William Mayer as an actor, and it's just 2 a.m. in the anthropology department. We would take a lot of photographs because there wasn't a lot going on. This is a theme. There's not a whole lot going on. You have to do something. So there's a caulking gun and a double exposure of himself with himself, and we had a tripod and a wallet. I just hold up the wallet in front of the thing and do a double exposure. This is me with Matt Chapman and Jackie Chapman. She was not Matt, his wife. He made Strong Bad's Email and Homestar Runner and stuff. I played bass in his band for one day, and I don't think he likes me that much. But again, it's important to have connections with people who are good at things that you don't know anything about, like animation, for example. This is the Stroger Library at Florida State. Some of you may be familiar. Strozier is a large library structure containing primarily books and also kids surfing porn and primarily failing. When I was there, Strozier was notable because in the basement you could play network video games, and they had not figured out a way to block that. I did not partake in these games, but it was a thing to do. A friend of mine, Sabrina, and I decided to go to library science school, which was an option where you could either become a librarian or a technologist. You could be a web person or a library person. At the time, in 96, 97, 98, there wasn't that much distinction between libraries and web pages. And the future seemed very bright. There will be jobs everywhere. You must go to the West Coast afterwards. What could possibly go wrong? You graduate right around 2000, it's going to be great. So I went to library school and chose the technology track. So there was this Coke machine. This is not the actual Coke machine. This is actually a Coke machine from Clemson. I had to go online to find a picture of a Coke machine. And when you do that, you'll find that there's a lot of different kinds of Coke machines. And so it's hard to find a representation of the one you want. But it's in a library, so that's close enough for me. So there was this Coke machine. This also isn't the one, but it's from Flickr, and it's more like the one. This one's actually in the snow, which didn't happen before, because that can't happen. And the situation basically was that I wanted Coke, but I didn't have any money because I was broke. I specifically wanted Diet Coke. And so I wanted this, and this cost 75 cents. It still pretty much does, it's like $1 now. But, 15 years ago, I really wanted this thing, and I couldn't have it. We'll talk more about that in a second. So I was super broke, using a lot of coupons to eat food. I was on scholarship. It was a weird time. There's another photo of Strozier Library in 1980, apparently. Pretty much the same thing, just a big, empty, deserted nothing. It's just a wilderness of nothing. You might notice in all of these pictures, there's almost no one. There is just nothing. This is Florida. There's nothing there. There is now, because people move there now. It's empty. But I didn't take classes up there. It was a different building. I was over in the Sliss building in the basement. And there was a way to arrange your classes so that you had them either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And if you did them Tuesday, Thursday, they would take a lot longer, like a 3-hour class. But instead of taking 2 of them or 3 of them, take 1 of them. So I, being super stupid, decided to put all my classes on Tuesday, Thursday so I could have a bunch of jobs on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the weekend. So I was really tired all the time. So that was a problem. This is one part of the reason I wanted all those Diet Cokes. But I was super broke. I was super duper broke. This is me when I'm 9 with my science fair experiment. I was not, I don't know, I guess I wasn't pleased at the time. But this is again in Florida. This is in South Florida, where I primarily grew up. And the title of the project is How Soil Affects Plant Growth, which means that I decided on this the week before because I realized, oh shit, science fair project. Oh shit, I'm going to talk a thing. I got to do a thing. So then my dad was like, I'm going to take a picture of you. You take 42nd place, So. But back to the Diet Coke. I was in library school with a bunch of smart people, and we're taking all these crazy classes about stuff early in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so I would sit there after working my night job the night before, totally exhausted, and I had a view out like a door. So you can imagine that I'd be sitting basically here, looking at a door with those little kind of cut windows. It's just sort of a sliver, and through the door I could see a Coke machine. And all I wanted was Diet Coke, but I didn't have 75 cents. I'll do most of my talking in this section. Basically, I'd stare out this window, looking at this Coke machine. And because it was so early in the friggin' morning, because I was taking these Tuesday, Thursday classes, which you weren't really supposed to do, because it's not really smart, I would see the guy come and refill the Coke machine. So what would happen, I'm going to walk you through this. If I forget something, anybody who's heard this before can comment. I try to avoid telling this story because I think the statute of limitations probably has now run out, but I'm not positive on that, so you could Google it. The process was like this. The man would walk up, he'd have a big cart full of Cokes, Diet Cokes, Sprites, whatever the Coke has. He would take a key, he'd open up the machine, there's a door in the front, that machine, the door comes open. He would kind of examine the level of what was going on. He would consult this little computer panel, which is where the money comes in and the money gets taken out, I guess. I don't know, I didn't see that part. All I saw was man with many Cokes, putting Cokes in a machine. And I was just sitting there being sad because I didn't have 75 cents, and sad because I was in Florida, and sad because it was so hot. Hot inside the room, that kind of hot, where which is bad. Like, it was in a basement, so how could it still be hot in the basement? You know, but it was. And I would just watch it. He'd fill up the Cokes, and he would close the thing. And when he closed the machine, he would take out the money, you know, he'd replace the Cokes that had been, you know, had. He would make note of how many Cokes it constituted. He would close the door, and the Coke machine, there's a light in the door behind the thing. There's a light that makes that shine. And it would go flicker, 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 flash, turn off, turn on. Hey, Ryan, how's it going? And then he, you know, this is after he closes the door, flicker, flicker, flicker. And then he would reach down and press a button. A Coke would come out, and he'd put it back in his thing of Cokes. And he would move to the next machine, which was like a something else machine. He'd refill it. And like, I was just like, something seems weird about this. Something seems weird about this. And in general, I felt like a Diet Coke would fix most of my problems. I was tired, I was poor, but I didn't want to pay for it. It would be refreshing. You know, I was taking a class on a thing called Q theory, and some of you may be more learned than I on this topic, but there were all sorts of things discussed in this. One of them was like, when you go to stand in a line, like how long should the line be, and how do you select the most optimized line to get to the end of the line fastest? How do you do inventory control if you're at like a supermarket? And so I'd be sitting there just like staring out this door, and my professor would be saying like, blah, 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 and like, at McDonald's there's like 5 lines, but at Burger King there's like 1 line, the big loopy thing. You walk around the thing, and you go and you pay your money, you know, like, okay, I was so tired, I really wanted Diet Coke. Didn't have the 75 cents. And I watched this day after day. Like, I watched this Tuesday, Thursday, I watched this man walk by, and something was really weird. Something seemed weird about that. So, here are the things that after a lot of thinking about this and not paying attention to my class, I decided were weird. Why did it go flicker, flicker, flash when he closed the door? What was that? Was my first question. Secondly, why did it dispense a Coke after closing the door and pressing a button? And third, how was I going to get this effing Diet Coke without paying for it? So I asked around, I asked my friend Sabrina, what's weird about this? And she was like, the primary weird thing is that you're spending all this intellectual energy on trying to like think about this Coke machine. I was like, no, something is weird. There's something about, there's an angle here, there's some kind of angle here. So I called my dad at one point. I've never told my dad the actual story here, but I asked him the broad outlines, because my dad knows a lot of things about a lot of topics, like vending machines and stuff, and like how cable television works and stuff. So you call him up and I'd say, hey, look, and I described the scenario to him, and I said, why does it go flicker, flicker, flash? He said, oh, it's rebooting. And I said, what, the Coke machine reboots? He's like, yeah, you close the door, it reboots. Why would it reboot? Oh, well, he's just cleared out all the money. He's taken all the money out of it, except for the change reservoir. He zeroed out the inventory account, so everything is full, and then he presses a button, and then closing the door is the last step in rebooting it. And then the flicker, flicker, flash is literally a power cycle of the computer in the Coke machine. I said, great, so why does it give him a free Coke after it reboots? He said, well, it's testing the dispensing mechanism to make sure that the chute is connected up to where the Cokes are. And so he gets one out, he puts it back in his tray, and he moves on. So they always assume there'll be 1 Coke down in the machine. That's how it's designed. Now, I don't know if this is true. I still don't know if this is true, but this seemed reasonable to me. And I was like, okay, that seems useful. What do I do with this information? I have to find a way to reboot the Coke machine. So, this leads to a brute force attack on the Coke machine. The first thing that I did was I tried unplugging the Coke machine and replugging it when nobody was around, which did not cause it to flicker, flicker, flash. It did not reboot the Coke machine, because something about closing the door was involved in rebooting the computer. It didn't work. I tried pressing all the buttons a lot. That didn't do anything. No free Coke. I tried a lot of different things. To keep the long story short, I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And eventually one day, there was a thing called an FSU card, which was a smart card at the time. It was a little thing with a chip on it. You could put money onto that chip, you could put the chip in a little card reader that had been added onto the Coke machine later. Like, if you think back to like the mid-90s, or if you think back to the early 90s, there were Coke machines that they had added on a dollar reader. That wasn't like original equipment for the Coke machine. And the dollar reader, when you put a dollar in, would just put 4 quarters, as if you put 4 quarters in. That's what it was. It was a hack into the Coke machine. So there were ways to like mess with that, which we had done in middle school. There's this thing called the Pineview dollar, which some of us may recall, where you would like take a dollar bill that was right side up and a dollar bill that was upside down, tape them together with a length of Scotch tape, feed the good one in, so it would accept it and go ding, 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 4 quarters just got put in, get to the bad one, say that's a bad dollar, reject it, and the whole thing will slide out and make a dollar. The problem with this is if you share this information with anybody else at your school, pretty soon they would upgrade the Coke machine and the $5 dollar would cease to work. So I tried that. That didn't work. They'd solved that problem somehow. They had some kind of Scotch tape detection system. Eventually, I put in my FSU card, on which I had about 50 cents because I never had any money. And it was on the chip. It wasn't identifiable to me. There was a mag stripe, but it was not the same as the chip. You could put money in the chip, you could take money off the chip, and it was anonymous. Long story as to why I know that. I knew some people who had done some bad things regarding these chips. But I knew that this was just a chip. You could put money on it. I had 50 cents. And so one day I put money on it with 50 cents. The drinks all cost 75 cents. And I pressed the button for Diet Coke. And it thought, and it said insufficient funds. So it's scrolling this little animated, like pathetic 1996, like insufficient. We put an LED screen on here for a reason, you know, like, oh wow. And I just hit it again. So it's sort of like, it was like, oh man, he hit it again while we were animating the first insufficient fund. Well, let me think about that. Insufficient funds, and it starts getting like jerky with the second press. So I'm like, press, 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 press. And you can see it like triggering requests from like the FSU card machine in the sky to like the little like dollar reader to the LED screen, and they all hacked into this thing. This was not designed to like dispense beverages on the internet or whatever. So what happened was I just went tick, 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 tick on Diet Coke, and all of a sudden, flicker, flicker, flash, the machine turned off, turned back on, and I pressed the button, and it dispensed the Diet Coke. And ejected the card before I could press the button, because it had rebooted the Coke machine. And I was basically high at that point. And I went upstairs to my friend Sabrina, who worked in the computer lab, and I said, "You're never going to believe it, I found a way to steal Coke." And she said, "I don't believe it, let's go down and steal Coke." And so, I'm not going to implicate anybody else, but some Coke was, in measured amounts, was occasionally taken. But this started a discussion in my mind after an investigation of some other things as to what was the bug in the Coke machine, what was wrong with the Coke. This is welcome to my brain, right? I really wanted the Coke, now I had the Coke. What was wrong with the Coke machine? What had I managed to get into? And there are a couple candidate ideas. So one is, it took too long to think. You know what I mean? So if I pressed the button and it said, you only have 50 cents, but this costs 75 cents, and therefore that's insufficient funds, so I'm going to send a thing up to the thing. And that whole process was so CPU or something intensive that it like caused the computer to be overloaded, that was too long. That was one thought that I had. Another seemingly fatal bug, I thought, was this thing should never reboot unless it's directly after a door close. Like, it should never just reboot spontaneously. There's no reason for that to happen that I know of. I don't work in the beverage industry, but we should ask around. But it seems to me like that's a pretty basic bug. Like, you know, if you're designing Coke machines in the future, take note, children, like, you know, you should probably make sure that it only ever reboots in this one scenario, like physical interlock. Like, door has closed, and within 30 seconds it reboots. This is, in my opinion, another interesting bug, which is my FSU card was never going to have 75 cents on it while it was inside the machine. Right? Because I can't put money on that chip. You know, I can't put in $1 and it goes onto my card. I just put the card in, that's what it is. Every beverage costs 75 cents. It's different for a snack machine, where things cost different amounts of money. But this is a very straightforward machine. It should know. It should be able to say, this dude doesn't have enough money, he's out. Boom, go away FSU card, I'm not going to think about you anymore. Go put money on you, come back, and we'll have a Coke. So my conclusion was these are all bugs. Without all of these bugs, this would not have worked, basically, right? Because if it was not allowed to reboot, if I could not overflow it by doing this thing, this would never have happened. And if it had been smart enough to ditch my card knowing I didn't have enough money, it also wouldn't have happened. So I proceeded to test every other machine on campus, which took about 2 months. And there was one other machine on the second floor of the film school that had the same bug, and no other machines were affected. No other Coke machines, I should say, were affected. But I told some friends in film school, and they were very happy about this. But not very many friends, because it's important when you're stealing Coke. It's still a limited amount of Coke. But guess what? Snack machines. Actually, I didn't work with snack machines. I tried a lot of them and it just didn't seem to work. And I have a whole other story about snack machines. You can invite me back sometime and I'll tell you about that. About how they ended up taking down the original version of the FSU card and replacing it because some friends of mine, some filmmaker friends who remain unnamed internet, had done some very naughty things in discovering overflows in the snack machine system. Next up, welcome to my life, age 12. I come from a place called Venice, Florida, where again, there's nothing. There's only old people. Our natural resources are old people and shark's teeth. Shark's teeth would wash up on the shore. We were called the shark's tooth capital of the world. I don't know if this is true. It seems normal to me that shark's teeth would just be everywhere, like in your lawn, like in your house, like on the beach. I did not know this was unusual until I moved away from the shark's tooth capital of the world, and there were not shark's teeth everywhere. There was not much going on. I'll show you some pictures of Venice. This is the Venice Public Library in 2010. I spent many years there. It's actually a lovely place. I recommend it highly. But this is where I spent a lot of my time. There are some children in this picture, which is shocking because there was some stat, and I'm going to get it wrong, I always get it wrong, something like 75% of the population is over age 75. So everybody else, 25% of the population was like of working age, right? So like to be a child in this situation, to be like a 7 or 8 year old, was highly abnormal. So there really weren't any. There were like just enough of us to be dangerous. I spent a lot of time sitting back there. They used to have a lot of tables and go sit there. This is probably some kind of fun day. Venice, a city of Gulf, on the Gulf Coast side of Florida. Down at the way bottom, it's really hot. This is a bridge. This is a true story. Venice, they had carved out a section of Venice. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had decided to carve a waterway around a segment of the coast to make it into an island so there would be more waterfront, to make it more valuable. So part of Venice was an island and therefore much more desirable. This was on the island. This was one of the 3 bridges. And I spent a lot of time with that little thing. There's a lot of that. Some more of that. Venice Gondoliers are local paper. I got written up on that quite a few times. Notice that even the gondolier parking sign is being overtaken by kudzu. This is 2008 when I went back from my high school reunion, which is a whole other story. This is a marker left by the Army Corps of Engineers when we're building a coastal waterway. This might be intro coastal, I was getting it wrong. So here's the deal, I missed 7th grade. I was sick that year. And without getting into the details of how and why I was sick that year, let's just say that if you're sick for like enough of the year, then you're just sick the whole year. They're just like, don't come back. And we'll get you a tutor and you can just do your thing. That's the keynote default lady on this team. I didn't like school very much. We've discussed how much I didn't like school, I didn't like Florida. I'm not a bad person, I just didn't like it. Didn't really agree with me, but I did like CompuServe and fancy guppies, and yes, that is a thing that people like. See that? Look at that shit. It's amazing. That's totally a thing. I know that. I know all about these because I read every book that was ever written about fancy guppies. If you don't believe me, go to Venice Public Library and search. There are many kinds of fancy guppies, which is something that nerds will appreciate. You know, if there's a lot of diversity in your little subtopic, you'll get very into it, and you'll read every goddamn book, even if it's in German, and you have to read the translation about fancy guppies. I managed to write an article about fancy guppies called The Care and Feeding of Fancy Guppies. I was not then very talented in the headline department. It was what I considered at the time kind of my best work, possibly my only work, because I filmed some music and stuff. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about writing this article over the course of some of these slides here. And I thought I could pass around something that was sort of remarkable, kind of starting at the end, which was after this article came out, a lot of things happened. One of them was, I had mentioned the IFGA, of which I was a paying member. It was $10 a year to get a photocopied newsletter in the mail, the International Fancy Guppy Association. I doubled the membership in 1 month just by mentioning them, and then they really were like reinvigorated, and like the fancy guppy hobby was exploded across like the international spectrum, and they sent me this plaque. So, if I may read from the plaque, it says Christopher Higgins an appreciation, and there's this like total guppy-related world logo with a crown on it for your dedication and the promotion of the fancy guppy hobby, April 1992. This is significant because this is April 1992. It's a long time ago, so I'll pass this around. A visual aid. They sent me a plaque. It's important to say that I did not invent fancy guppies. I primarily read about fancy guppies in the public library and then wrote an article about them. And it granted in a big magazine, and some stuff happened. But I was a hobbyist. I never had more than probably 3 fish tanks, usually 2. And these professionals would have 200, 300. I went to visit them and talk to them, and it was amazing. It was insane. After I wrote this article, and again, I'll tell you about writing the article in a minute, the Associated Press came to my house and interviewed me about writing the article. Let me tell you right now, if you're 12, don't talk to the media. You're not going to handle it well. You're going to say stuff that's going to make you look really stupid in like 20-ish years. And there's a Google service that indexes newspapers. For example, I'm not sure which one this is. WizKid wanted Little Fish taken seriously. When guppy guru Chris Higgins was paid $150 for a 2001 article he wrote for a national magazine aimed at serious fish hobbyists, he kept a secret from the publisher. He's 13 years old. I was 12 when I wrote it, since when it came out. That's true, but that's an angle. That's what we call in the writing business an angle. The angle is this kid conceals his identity to write this article. It's not really what happened. It is what happened, let's be fair. It wasn't why it happened. Guppy Wiz 13 writes story for National Magazine. Oh, shit. Shit, dog. That's not good. By Associated Press. That's a big thing. A lot of people run that. I was getting emails from people from a long way away. Yeah, I had email in 1992. That was another part of this thing. Guppies! That's me in a computer lab at school that I didn't go to anymore because they wanted a picture of me with computers, and my computer was too inexpensive and crappy to be photographed. This was originally a color photo. I couldn't find the color version of it. It's on there somewhere. Go Google it. I encourage you. They photographed me sitting in the IB computer lab in front of a 386 with a color display, which I would have killed. I would have literally killed someone unimportant for. But you know, I get it, right? Guppy WizKid writes for magazine. Dudes, this is 9th of March, okay? So this has been going on for over a week at this point. So basically, the Associated Press runs stuff, and so all over the place. It's not just Florida. This is like sweeping the nation. WizKid governor on the air. What is there? I don't know. What is that? He got a computer. He didn't disclose his age. So here's how this shit goes down. This one has a lot of builds. I'm going to move over here so I can read them. I'll be a little bit. Okay, I'll kind of block the thing. So you go online 91 with a computer and your modem, which nobody knows what those two things are. And you meet some nerds who like a thing. In my case, it was fish. Fancy guppies. I worked for, I kid you not, for a thing called FishNet. This is the 3rd biggest interest group on CompuServe. It was amazing. You get a job because you're broke and you can't afford to pay for this. You get a job, kind of semi-pro bono situation where you do some work and you get free access to the online service, the FishNet, doing this nerd stuff. You run whatever, you do nerd stuff. Oh, you're 12. Well, I don't have to tell them I'm 12. They don't care. You know, they're not paying me money. It's just all free. Nobody cares. It's the internet. It's actually CompuServe. It's the same thing. So there are 12-year-olds today, I'm quite certain, who have jobs, you know, just like I did. I was not the only one who was doing this kind of thing. I've talked to people who were 14 and had whiz-up permission. It's a long story. So you got on there, some other magazine dudes on there. Okay, hey, fellow nerd, let's talk about fish. Okay, hey, what's up? You like fish? Yeah, I do. You like fish? Great. He says, hey, you seem to write a lot about fish, and there are always messages about the fish and emails and stuff. Why don't you write a thing about guppies for a magazine? Okay, what else am I doing? I'm 12. I have no money. I have a computer with a black and white, amber and black screen, and all I do is hang out in the library with my guppies or whatever, you know? So it turns out to be the biggest fish magazine in the world, Aquarium Fish Magazine, look it up, and the editor's named Ed Bowman, he's a really cool dude. It's in Walden Books. Okay, like that's how big this was. This was Cat Fancy, Dog Fancy, Aquarium Fish Magazine. There was no fancy in it, but that's what it was. Like in Walden Books to me was like, that That was bigger than the public library. That was a huge deal, like at the mall, you know? So you get published in this magazine, everybody freaks out. Everybody freaks out. Like, all of your friends freak out, like, the Associated Press freaks out, like everybody you met online didn't know you were 12, and now they know you're 12 because they read the paper and they've read the word fishnet written in their local paper from Alaska or Hawaii or whatever, and they email you and say, hey man, are you really 12? To which you write back, yeah, or 13, yeah, you know. And for the most part, honestly, I would say, like, I can't think of anybody who was actually pissed off about this except the person who thought up the angle, like, you know, this, ooh, duping the publisher. By the way, the original headline in the Tampa Tribune, which is not available for free on the internet, was, I want to say it was Guppy Guru dupes publisher. Right, that was the angle, Guppy Guru. It's going to come back to haunt me. So I would go to school, when I went back to school, because I missed a whole year while I was off writing about fish and being like a doof with my computer and stuff. It's a whole other talk on that as to how that occurred. But you come back and everybody starts calling you Guppy Guru, because now you're weirder than now. You know, like this is a weird school, but like that was weird. That was legitimately weird. Everybody was like, "I saw you in the paper and you were at school, but you don't go to school here for a year. So how did that happen?" Well, I don't know. I don't let the press into your house. That's important. Step 14, quit gifted school, become a much bigger fish in a much smaller pond. This is a lesson for you children out there who may end up having the same thing happen to you. I don't know if it would happen today, but in the early 90s, I decided I'd rather go to like the small high school than the big high school, and they wouldn't know that I was a Guppy Guru there, because they don't read at the small high schools. No offense, it was a lovely school. Step 15, grow long hair, be a weirdo, get some facial hair, experiment with bands. And step 16 is college. Again, that's Ransom Riggs and me visiting NYU. Neither of us went to NYU, even though it seemed lovely. That's actually how I dressed. I wore a photographer's vest every day for several years, including all this stuff, because I would carry on a camera and all this. That was my actual hair. It's not like prop hair or Photoshop hair or anything. That was a lot of problems here. And college, as we've talked about, was Florida State University. Remember this? Florida State University was basically free. So that's why, it had a good film program, which I wanted to go to and didn't go to. And had a good library science program, so I went there too. But I wasn't very enthusiastic about it, because it was really early in the morning and I wanted Diet Coke. Let's skip forward to last year. Actually, a little bit before last year. It's a very provocative title, How to Get on the Radio. It's really easy. It's actually not really easy. Just do all the things that just happened for the course of 20 years, and then start working for a trivia magazine. Okay, this is very important. Ransom got this job. Do that for a long time. Don't piss anybody off. Get a track record of having something you did. This is the instructional portion of the video where I teach you how to write. Quit your commuter job. Sorry, Cubby. It's great. But I had to quit because I used so much trivia to write. You know. Get a job writing kids books. Awesome. Night and Day Studios. And they paid me money to write books for kids, which was like, oh my god, you know, super big dream. Get laid off when that company loses the contract to no fault of its own because the economy collapses. That's not good. Actually, get laid off 3 days after you close on a house that you bought because you were so psyched because your career was really going awesome. So you close the house and 3 days later it's like, yeah, we really have to let you go. But you can contract. You know, contracting is great. It's just, you know, it's kind of a layoff situation. Again, the freaking out, mortgage, being broke, etc. The main driver of most of my life is panic and financial concerns. And email everybody you know looking for work. This actually is a pretty good technique. It's a pro tip I have for you, which is if you don't have work, just email everybody you want to know and say, do you have any work? And in my case, about half of them were like, sure, I got some work, doesn't pay much, but I got some stuff. Get some assignments from your trivia magazine that you've worked for 4 years, doing some stuff. Thing 1, the Brooklyn Bridge. Thanks, Carl. I went over to Carl's house. He explained the Brooklyn Bridge to me, and explained bridges to me, and explained why I shouldn't write about just bridges in general, but the Brooklyn Bridge in specific. Wrote an article about that, make a few $100, you know, pay part of your mortgage, be happy about your life. Okay, let's talk about the science of happiness. This happened to me. She said, my editor said, hey, look, I want you to do these two. Brooklyn Bridge, science of happiness. I said, what is the science of happiness? She said, you know, like dopamine. Like, why do you get happy in your brain? How does it happen? Okay. And so you call up some dude at HSU who does something with the brain and ask him some questions about dopamine. So you're asking about dopamine because you're an idiot and you just Googled dopamine. The Wikipedia says a lot about how happiness is dopamine and blah, blah, blah. And you have a lot of questions about like, what's the opposite of happiness? And what if you want to get unhappy? Is there an anti-dopamine, etc.? By the way, it's a real guy. We'll get to this in a minute. And figure out quite quickly that dopamine is really boring. And the guys who study this are like, dopamine means nothing. Like, dopamine is not, I mean, it has to do with happiness, but if you're going to write a magazine article, it's going to be like, okay, so dopamine kicks in and you get happy. Done, story over. What's really interesting, says guy that I'm talking to, is this thing called narcolepsy with cataplexy. Narcolepsy is a condition in which people fall asleep. And you've probably seen this in movies where everything collapses or whatever. And I thought, oh, they fall asleep. In fact, that was what I was diagnosed with back when I missed a year of school. I don't think that was the correct diagnosis now, based on what I now know. But narcolepsy is associated with a thing called cataplexy. And cataplexy is where, if any of you have heard the American Life piece, 80% of narcoleptics also have this thing where if they experience a triggering emotion, meaning a strong emotional condition in their lives, they will collapse. They will enter REM sleep in a bodily state, but not a mental state, which means they lose control over their bodies, they go limp, and they fall down. And all they can do is listen. If their eyes happen to be propped open, they can see, but they usually aren't, and that's it. Excuse me. This can last for seconds, minutes, or up to 12 hours, a thing called status cataplecticus, which often happens, for example, if you love dogs and they're licking you on the face. And your trigger is happiness from your dog. This has happened. This is really bad. It's also pretty funny. There's this mixture of tragedy and sadness about this whole thing. So this guy just launches into this whole thing, and I'm like crossing off the dopamine questions, right? Okay, tell me all about this. Okay, doctor at OHSU, have you ever met any patients who have this? This sounds so horrible. Wait, you have this? You, the doctor who studies the brain and the science of the thing with the stuff? Is this, okay. Oh, you have one of the worst cases in the entire world? Oh my! Let's talk about that. Hey, editor of my magazine, I think we should run a feature on this guy. This is crazy. He's like working on a cure. There's no cure, by the way. There's like some treatments, and they're really bad. I think we should really run with this. She says, I don't think we should do that. So without going any further into that, because I love the magazine and everything, she said, I don't think we're gonna do that. Let's just find out some more funny stuff about happiness. So I was like, okay, thanks. Hey, nerd friends. Everybody on Facebook. I literally posted a Facebook message that said, does anybody know anybody who has been on This American Life? Important lesson, if you spend 20 years being a nerd and a dork, and having nerd dork friends who have gone on trying to be successful in their own nerdy dorky things, somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. In this case, Shalise Yang, who's a friend who went to Kenyon with Ransom Rigs, who you've seen a couple times and who photographed a lot of this stuff, knew people who'd been on the show and forwarded my email to them. One of them was Josh, and I said, basically, hey Josh, how do I get on This American Life? And he said, I'll figure it out, it's happening. And I'm like, wait, now? And he's like, yes, now, it's going to be on the radio like tomorrow, like get him in the booth tomorrow, we're going to record this thing. Like what I'm saying right now, and then the thing in the booth is going to be on the radio, he's like, yeah, I'll be on the radio like in a week. So between kind of like the first finding of that story, being on the radio, there was a little bit of a pause while I interviewed the guy and did some stuff, but between meeting the guy who'd been on the show and actually being on the air was very, very rapid, like scarily rapid. So the thing is, it helps not have a job when this happens, because if they're like, hey, can you spend Wednesday at OPB and like record some stuff? That's useful. And what this leads to is now the business cards are, that's that, and it's a surprisingly successful author, 1992 to 2011 inclusive. And I've been told to try to keep this short. I think I've run over, but I have room for Q&A, and I have some backup slides if anybody has questions. And I'm going to take a little drink of Diet Coke right now. Does anybody have any questions about writing or the internet or?
What's next? What are you doing?
There's like a long answer to that, like a short, medium answer, and a short answer. I'm working, I'll try to do a reasonable one. I'm trying to assemble a series of different things to pitch. Some of them are to mental floss, and some of them are to This American Life and other people. There is some interest, whenever you do at This American Life, a bunch of good and bad vultures descend and say, hey, would you like to write a book about that? And you say, sure. And they're like, hey, what's it about? And you'll be like, I don't know, like the guy, and the guy says, I don't want to be in a book. And you're like, oh no, I guess we're not going to do a book. And then the guys who want to write the book are like, let's make a different book about something different, because we can still sell that, because it was on the radio, we can sell a thing based on the radio. So for a while I thought I was going to write a book about sleep and all that kind of stuff, until I went up to the library and read all the books about sleep and found out that everybody had already written my book for me. And like they were all from Harvard and stuff. So they were like better books about the thing I was going to write about. And the only reason that I would actually be writing a book is because I could. That's a really bad reason to write a book. So I didn't write a book. There is some possible interest in making a movie out of it. And the current plan is maybe to do a romantic comedy. I'm not very involved in this process. I'm involved in the pitching of it. And it's an interesting angle. It's basically like, let's take the notion of a story about this condition without involving the actual details of that actual guy, and like present a comedic treatment of this that has nuance and subtlety, but also falling down jokes, because falling down is funny. And that's an interesting thing, because I mean, there's a lot of capsulated here about like relationships, and like the whole piece was really about. Basically, the angle was how do you maintain a relationship when you can't you can't touch your wife without falling down. That was really what the piece was about. By the way, I do have some clips that got cut out of the piece that I probably could play if I stuck this to that. And if you haven't heard, it's worth. I'm not allowed to like just play the piece unless I go to the webpage and do that. I do have some sort of redacted material that's kind of interesting. Because we cut it down from a much longer story to be like about 10 minutes just to fit this little slot at the end. But to not answer your question, I'm working on some other stuff with other people in Portland. Short version is it involves the internet, Nigeria, immigration, and sadness, and tremendous cross-cultural problems. And you probably know some people who are involved in it, so we can talk later about it. But it's a little too early to really talk about publicly. I can play some clips. Want to hear a clip? Okay, I'm going to pull up my bonus clips. So just a show of hands, who in this room has heard This American Life piece to which I refer? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, well, there was a piece that we really didn't want to lose but had to because it was really long, and this is the super cut down version of it. So like if you imagine, the fellow talks fairly slowly, as it is, the interview subject, and so we ended up cutting this way, way down to cut out all the pauses. It was still a minute and a half, so we had to cut this out. This is a story, this is what's called the Starbucks story. This should work, right? What could go wrong?
She noticed that I was starting to
Can't do anything?
sort of droopy. And
Hang on, I think we can maybe turn this up slightly over here. So I'll do this without killing everyone, hopefully.
Is that where your sound mixing background comes from?
Yeah, this is sound guy for a while.
she noticed that I was starting to get sort of droopy and quiet. And so she suggested that I go sit down and she'd order us some drinks. And so I wandered over to a table and had sat down when I basically lost motor control and ended up flopping forward onto one of those small tables for two. So basically the chair started to slowly slide backwards, and that was kind of an absurd moment because I'm lying there. I can't actually do anything to correct the situation. Wondering if there's anyone who notices that this is going on who might conceivably stop the chair from doing this. Just sort of waiting for that moment when my back end is going to get far enough away that I'm either going to fall out of the chair or off the table. In the end, the chair
So that's an example of what we had to cut out just for time. There's an example that I talk over in the piece that I think is more uncomfortable when you listen to it here, which is about 2 minutes long. And we ended up talking over it because it seemed so uncomfortable to listen to him being so quiet and slowing, because he was having an attack during the talking about this. And again, we've compressed time a bunch. We've cut out a bunch of time. That original story was like 5 or 6 minutes long, talking about what's going through his mind in the Starbucks. So it's already been professionally edited down to the minimum possible thing. But this clip was 2 minutes, and we kept most of it. And it's about how he went to his brother's wedding and was basically in status cataplecticus the whole time, because he's standing there, or sitting there, like collapsed in a chair and listening to the wedding. Because he had to be there. He had to be there, right?
Poor Matt.
This is his wife.
This was one of those things that, you know, it was just not okay for him to miss, even though we knew it would be difficult.
His wedding ceremony was a very small one. They wanted to take pictures of the whole group immediately after my attack hadn't cleared up, so they all basically clustered around where I was propped up against the wall, and included me. And so that was very sweet of them.
When you look at those pictures, what do you think?
This was only a couple of weeks ago. I haven't actually seen them yet.
Are you concerned about it? It seems like it might be, I don't know, sort of strange, but also absolutely sweet.
Yeah, and in honesty, I probably won't spend much time dwelling on those pictures because it makes it more difficult to not have an attack. It can be a triggering condition just to discuss it even. So generally things like that happen, and I try to appreciate the moment when it happens and not pick it up again and examine it until I can do so safely and briefly.
So right now, do you feel any extra heaviness after having talked about this?
Yeah, it's a bit harder to initiate movements, and I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I feel like my eyes are sort of drooping a bit.
After this, he went and laid down for about an hour, and like he was basically collapsing in his chair, and so it was a really rough moment. But this is his daily life. You know, if you talk about anything happy, even if it's a polluted memory that's like a happy memory that's also really sad, this happens. I guess one more piece, which was pretty intense. This is, I think, a mixture of his wife and he talking about the crux of the angle, which is how do you maintain this marriage? And some of this made it in, some of this got cut out for time.
What's the deal?
Oh, hang on. So I had asked the wife, because I couldn't figure out a better way to say it, I said, what's the deal with sex? Because that's,
What's the deal with sex? Well, it's very, very, very difficult. If hand-holding and hugging and feeling a strong emotion sent him into a cataplectic attack, you can imagine that trying to be physically intimate will do that too. We do manage, not as frequently as we used to, and those tender times, or wouldn't it be great to spend the entire day in bed together, don't happen. And there's this emotional bonding that comes during that act that I miss, and I know he misses it too. And yet if he feels, I want to feel that, that's enough to make him have an attack.
I think really the sort of the central question that we have to grapple with is the act of simply living in the same house and the same life
with somebody about I care very deeply about the love of my life, is that sufficiently disruptive to my ability to function?
It's hard to hear that my love, and when you have those wonderful close moments, when you hold hands or sit with your arms around one another, you just want to reflect on, this is a pretty cool person I'm spending my life with. Those make him sick. And sometimes what goes through my mind is a little guilt, because, is that fair to put him through that? And am I just doing it for myself? It's really frightening to think it would be so easy for him to say, this costs too much, it costs too much. And I still don't know 100%, that if things got bad, worse, whether or not that's a decision that he would feel like he had to make eventually. I hope not.
So that was deemed sufficiently depressing to cut out portions of that. And it's true, I talked to both of them afterwards at some length about, like how real is it that this might happen, you guys might not live together. And it's, I don't know, it's an open question. It's still working out a year plus later. And I think they were going to book last I heard about their lives. So, anybody else got any zingers? Florida questions? All right, well.
Do you want to do some of the backup slides?
I've got backup slides. You guys are game.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a
So I promised a lot of things in writing about this talk that I didn't really actually talk about. So I can talk about those a little bit. And one of them is just how does technology affect my writing? In short, the first significant thing that I did, getting on CompuServe, which is the day's equivalent of the internet, that was what allowed me to get published. So how does technology affect my writing? It is a way to get published. It is a way to get directly to some other nerd who has some kind of power that you don't. Like I have this guy at a magazine, and he wanted somebody to write for the magazine. Also, a lot of the stories that I've worked with are in some way about technology. There's one that I didn't talk about tonight about this guy who took 6,697 Polaroids, roughly one per day for 17 years. And the last one was taken on the day that he died. And that, in and of itself, actually was a story about technology, with the enabling technology of this thing called the Polaroid SX70, a land camera developed in the 70s by Edwin Land and Polaroid that was a remarkably good piece of technology that actually gave you excellent photographs from a pocket-sized camera. When I say pocket-sized, it's like this big and like big pockets, And if you consider, in some ways, like what this guy did was, you know how expensive Polaroid photographs were. Like the film was really expensive, and so in like the late 70s, it was also really expensive. So to do it for 17 years every day and carry this thing around every day, it's really expensive. But I see his story as partly about an enabling technology that happened to come along at a time when there was no publishing technology that made sense. For people today, there's actually an iPhone app, I didn't write it, that I was at a conference and the little ding ding went off, and it's the Take a Photo a Day app. And it was inspired apparently by this guy, and every day these people take out their iPhones and take a picture of a thing. And they can then publish that to a thing. This guy, Jamie Livingston, who died in 1997, he did not have an internet to publish to. Presumably something would have happened had he done that. So technologically, I've covered technology stories. I've used it as a publishing medium, and I've used the step-up leverage of get published on a website, talk to people who have print interests, and then go to radio, then go to whatever else I'm going to do. Also, people who do movies have lots of money, and they pay attention to blogs for some reason. So that's a thing. What does technology mean for storytelling? I don't know. I think I mentioned this in the talk description. I think that technology, the most significant impact technology has had for me on storytelling is simply publishing. Publishing is cheap and easy. which means there's a bunch of crap. And there's always been a bunch of crap. That's the thing, is like there's always been a bunch of people who manage to publish crap. It's now just very frictionless to publish your crap. So if you want to publish your crap and you want to tell stories, you can. And you can buy like fancy microphones and PA systems and stuff for almost no money. Like when I was in high school and my friend wanted to make a sci-fi movie, not you, but you know what I'm talking about. It was unimaginable we would make a movie. We had to buy a video camera for many, many, many hundreds of dollars, which took many, many dishwashing hours. And today, like I could use my, my camera phone to do a like vastly superior thing. Like an iPod Touch would exceed all quality dimensions of everything he ever did. And so what it means for storytelling is that it's more about having a good idea and noticing that good idea, and less about, oh God, I can't afford like $10,000 for a movie here. This is a biggie. How do you spot a story and how do you get it into a thing? And this is what actually people do ask me fairly regularly, like, basically, how do I get famous at writing? Or how do I get to a point where I'm like, you can Google me and there's a lot of stuff out there. And I think the short answer is it helped me to know people, and it helped me to do work for little or no money for a long time. And it helped me to be okay with the idea of becoming a curator, which is a pretty trendy word right now for spotting a thing that you think is worth talking about. When I first got a job writing for the Mental Floss website, I was hired as one of the original, the second wave, I think, of bloggers, but it was 4.5 years ago. And it was this thing where I wrote a list the first couple days of everything that I'd ever thought of that I thought was interesting. I said, okay, what's everything I know about? And I literally made a bulleted list, and I have it. I can show it to you. It's very, very, very long. And I proceeded to write an article about every single one of those things. And then I ran out about a year into it, and I freaked out. I was like, I have nothing left to talk about. I'm done. This is everything I've ever known about. And so then what I had to turn into was a person who just sat there and looked for stuff. And any place you are, I promise you there is something you can write about. I mean, the best place to find the thing to write about is to go to the post office or to go to the checkout line and look around you. A good example, was it yesterday, the thing with the chapstick? Question, is chapstick, lip balm, are lip balms, no specific brand implied, are lip balms addictive or not? And almost everybody I've talked to has some kind of opinion on this. Oh yes, I am currently addicted to that and I am okay with that. Or yes, they're addicted, but I'm not okay with that, but I'm addicted to, I want to do it now, because now I feel weird because they talked about, if I say like lick your lips, like just try not to lick your lips now, So, and you can notice that it's like, okay, what's in the checkout line? Oh, there's gum. Apparently, sometimes if you like chew gum, you can get like TMJ. Like, that's a thing, let's talk about that. Like, I found out I was brushing my teeth wrong a couple years ago. Like, my whole life, I'm brushing my teeth wrong. One time I found a guy who'd done a study, I think it was, Norman maybe, who'd done a study about how to use toilet tissue. Like, the efficiency of the dual-roll toilet paper dispenser, because he had built a new house, he put in the 2 rolls, because he figured that way he'd never run out. What happened was he would run out simultaneously. And so he asked around and said, what's the deal? Why is this happening? And tried to apply his kind of awesome mental powers to the problem of the pooping. And what he discovered through studying this was that there's a human tendency to drive a roll to completion. So if you see a there's a human tendency to make the rolls equivalent. So if you see like a small roll and like a medium roll, you will go for the medium roll because there's more there. And you don't want to exhaust the small roll because then you have to change it, and that would be annoying. So you don't want to touch that, it's somebody else's problem. But if you live in a house with yourself or with one other person who's equally lazy, you tend to kind of go back and forth until they both run out simultaneously. And so he developed an algorithm for utilizing toilet tissue, which was always choose the smaller roll. It's a very simple rule. Of any available set of rolls, choose the smallest one, drive it to completion, or replace it. And if they all seem to be equivalently large, pick any. Doesn't matter. And this solved his toilet paper problem. So I wrote this article called How to Use Toilet Paper Properly. And the Google rank on that shit is amazing. To this day, we get thousands of visitors a year who type that into Google. How do I use toilet tissue? Because they found other stuff too. There's an online survey you can take that says, are you a folder or a crumpler? I know you know what I'm talking about. And if you're a folder, how many times can you reuse the same folded set before it's needs to have the next one? And what do you use, the soft kind or the strong kind? And how is that correlated to the folding and the crumpling? You know, so like this is the kind of thing that like if you go into the world and you just observe anything, like what's gaffing tape? You know, we're gaffing, like things have been gaffed here, right? What's a gaffer? There's a gaffer in our band. I'm still not sure what he gaffs, you know, on a day-to-day basis. But he gaffs stuff at sets, at shows, you know. They're like, oh, we're gonna go do this thing. I don't think he uses the verb to gaff, but I do, because as far as I can tell, he's gaffing. He's like laying things out and like taping them, and he knows what kind of tape to put on a different thing. What's that? There's an article. Go sell that, you know. Like so, there's just all kinds of weird stuff, and the noticing, the being okay with the idea of the noticing took me forever, and I'm still not 100%. I mean, there's like a voice in the back of my mind that says you should have a deep reservoir of like, in 1982, this thing happened, and let me tell you about it. I've already written about all of that. Like, it's all out there. And so it has become a thing of looking and noticing and knowing that people who I write for, they're going to like this kind of nerd, this specific kind of nerd thing. And related to that, how do you write a daily blog for 4 years? It's now almost going to be 5 years without like losing your mind. And I think that this comes up, just as what asked me all the time, is why do I keep doing this and how do I keep doing this? And would my time and attention be better spent elsewhere? You know, because it's not like I, you know, bought a house on my like sweet blog money, you know. But what's interesting about this is like, if you talk to people who meditate or who do any kind of like practice or who are, you know, alcoholics or exercisers, anybody who does a thing, anybody who does anything, if you have a daily practice of doing something, you're going to get better at it, and or you're just going to do it. And so for me, I'm somebody who tends to listen to the loudest voice in the room. So if I have clients who are like, hey, I need you to like make an iPhone app, I'm like, okay. You know, and if it's like, hey, I need you to like make a web page, I'm like, oh shoot, the web page is late, I need to make a web page. But I've also got this built-in thing that says every day, every weekday, you must find something and write something on the internet about it. And often those things that, you know, that forces me to do some writing. And you know what, after you do almost anything for like 4 or 5 years, like you become sort of, I dare say, an expert, you know, or like a recognized, like you have a skill at doing a thing, you know, and you can say, hey, I sort of know how to write a blog entry, you know, I know what's worth writing about and what's not, because I've written enough bull that it just didn't work. And I can tell you right now, like, don't do interviews. Like, nobody will read an interview on my blog. Maybe on your blog it's different. You're an interview, maybe do it with videos. People love videos. Secret for bloggers, people love videos. People don't like to like actually read a lot of things. And you know, you learn all these weird little lessons, like how to write good headlines. There's a downside to all of this, which is you tend to blogify a lot of things and write bullshit headlines. Because a bullshit headline it looks really great on Twitter, it's really clickable. It's really appealing to write that, even if it's not quite what your article is about. So like for example, you know, top 10 ways to do X. That is the headline of the 2000s. Like that's it. I hate that headline, but I've written that headline, and you know what? People click on that shit. So you just accept it, right? And how do you combine seemingly parents dying and the internet and all of ebooks, et cetera, insert your straw man problem here. You know what? Like anybody I've talked to who does a creative thing, most people I talk to who do a creative thing also do a technical thing. They do something or have done a technical thing on the way to doing their creative thing full time. And so there's an arc where you're trying to increase your creative thing, you're trying to decrease your technical thing. And there is a problem when you're this kind of person like me who went to school for computers and like has a computer and like knows about it sort of and like can get paid to do a computer, but kind of in the deep well of my soul wants to do like, you know, here's a story about a sad person and his relationship with the Starbucks and the sleeping and all the stuff. Like that's kind of what I am most fulfilled by, but also not what I get paid for. So there's a disincentive to the creative thing. So, how do you combine those things? My answer has been not to combine them. My answer has been to keep them rigidly separated and say that there is creative work and then there is technical work. And my experience as a human being informs, of course, anything that I write. You know, of course, I know how to use a computer, so I write about nerd things because that's just what I was most talk about. You know, but I also think that the whole ebook thing, I don't want to talk. I don't care. I don't care. It's not a problem. It's really not a problem. Did you hear that ebooks now are outselling print books on Amazon as of like pretty recently? Like, yeah, I heard that over Christmas or something, and it freaked me out. I have a couple pro tips. Make friends with photographers. They will make you look awesome when you're walking around in West Virginia. That's another Ransom Riggs photograph. He just published a book which included a lot of photography, and you know, I only included 2 of these. I think there's this one too. I'm like 18, 19 there. Make friends with people who are either really good at something, and even if it's accidental, even if it's just that you grew up with people or whatever, but like, you know, try to maintain relationships with people who can do a thing. Because when somebody then asks you as a writer or whatever, like, can I get a good headshot of you? And you say, I have a camera phone, you know, click, you know, like this is not gonna cut it. And so if you can call upon talented friends, I have called upon talented friends for everything, for please get me published. And to me, this actually leads to a sort of secondary pro tip, which is do people favors for free. You know, like, it's another thing people ask me about, like, you know, how do you know such talented people? Well, I don't know. I talked to them one time, and I did a thing for them, and now they're my friends, you know? Like, and if you do enough of those, you're going to blow a lot of your time doing stupid stuff, like on, you know, bad projects that don't go anywhere. But eventually, 20 years down the line, the guy who takes that picture is going to be on the New York Times bestseller list right now. Look at that guy. We were friends when we were 7 because we both liked Garfield. That is amazing. So, you know, having the ability to ask him, hey, do you know anybody who knows a thing about XYZ? Super useful. And now you all sort of know me, right? So like the sort of circle of thing, like somehow you get closer and closer to people who have some connection to something. And just asking, that's the final thing I think about this is, ask people for what you want. If you're a writer and you want to write something and you want to be published, you need to ask somebody. I mean, first of all, you need to write it, or at least have an idea, but just say, hey person who has a magazine, would you like to have me write a thing about a guppy? Or if they ask you, say yes. I have some other backup slides. This is kind of fun. It turns out you can figure out the distribution of beverage selection by examining the usage of the buttons. Does that make sense? So, presuming they didn't relabel this, the Diet Coke is most popular. You know, I would say that this thing, what was this, Coke Zero maybe? I don't know what this used to be. It's probably some other beverage. I'm going to guess this used to be like Mr. Pibb or something. But anyway, there's all kinds of stuff you can do by looking at these kinds of pictures. And somehow I find that fascinating. I think that's worth writing about. Go find some of this stuff. Take that photograph as many times as you can, and find data or whatever. That's my This American Life. If you want to listen to it, it's episode 409. It's called Held Hostage. Look, my name is right there. It's reddish. There's like an ad about it for nuns or something. This is the guy who took a Polaroid every day for a long time. And actually, that's another thing. It's kind of the next thing. I've been talking to the guy who has collected these photographs and put them online about whether there's a follow-up story on that. So I talked to a couple people last week about what might be done to return to this story. Because now this blog entry, I don't think I'm violating any like NDAs. Don't check internet. It's multiple millions of people have read this thing, and so like I'll run into people who are like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I was in This American Life one time, and I think about Polaroids and like Polaroid a day." And like, Polaroid a day? You were a Polaroid a day guy? I was like, "Yeah." So the web's a really weird thing. You can do a thing like this, and this, anyway, it stays around. This has been since 2008. It's been kicking around.
Oh, and there's the top 3 best of the best are all lists.
Right. So yeah, lists are an interesting problem. I mean, to me, because a list is a non-nuanced headline, it doesn't say very much. They tend to have really bombastic things in them. Like, let's see if there are amazing classic movie moments. 10 jobs you didn't hear about on career day, that's an okay headline. That's reasonable. It's probably the quick 10, which is actually a well-written top 10 list that Melfloss does. I don't write for that. But the writer who does that does a very good job of handling lists in a way that's non-link baity. And the website also does a very good job of not doing something like breaking up every entry in a different page, because that makes it more trying with somebody. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of my backup slides. And the only thing I had left was this Jim Morrison picture. Jim Morrison actually was in Tallahassee at Florida State for a while, and he got arrested for, I want to say, this was the thing he got pardoned for, I think, recently by the governor. It was like indecent exposure or like public urination or something. But he got booked into the Tallahassee Police Department, and there's a long story that I probably shouldn't get into about a guy who used to sell T-shirts of that in the student union, and his attempts to make a biopic about Jim Morrison's like 6-month stint at Florida State, and how he wanted my roommate to play Jim Morrison. And his main question was, "Are you okay with nudity?" To which the answer by the roommate was, "I guess. Like, what kind of nudity are we talking?" So it didn't really go anywhere. Yeah, take your backup slides. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. I'm going to change into my.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending. Thanks, Chris, once again. That was great. So we're taking a hiatus for the month of July. But we are going to resume again on August 2nd with the Riverdale High School robotics team. They participate in the first robotics competition. Team spent 6 weeks designing, building, and programming their robots to meet a specific design challenge. FRC robots are large and complex. They are usually at least 5 feet tall and can weigh 120 pounds. When the robots are completed, teams attend one or more regional competitions where 40 to 70 teams compete in the game during 3 days of fun-filled robotic insanity. So they're going to be talking about robots. Awesome. And their high school students.
Will they have robots here?
I'm hoping that they're going to bring it up.
Okay.
So yeah, we encourage things also. I hope so. So yeah, thanks everybody for coming.
Yay.
Cool. All right.
Thanks,
I gotta go. Good seeing you. Yeah.